foreign policy front, it's just the geopolitical environment that we are in. Just gives India a huge amount of opportunity, right? And I've always, like, if you've seen me, I've unabashedly been pro-West because I know that's where our future lies. Essentially, because if you want to pull yourself out of this morasses of being a poor country. I mean, we are technically a poor country. I mean, irrespective of what the GDP is, 2 trillion, and at the top, the top 5, 6. The basic point is that we are where we are in terms of uneducation, in terms of hunger, in terms of backwardness in technology at the basic level. So I've always felt that the only way we're going to get there is to become part of the supply chains, global supply chains. And this is excellent. What's happening between the United States, China, Russia, and now this war with Ukraine has really opened up a lot of opportunity, a lot of space for India. And we are now where we are. That we are now the cynosure of all the eyes. Everybody wants us. Just unfortunately, we've had a lot of issues domestically. But hey, as Indrani Bakshi writes, Putin made India the swing state in geopolitics. This is the important part. Putin did it. She says, writes in Rani Bakshi, from Mariupol to Kharkiv to Zaporizhia, the story is the same. Russia is running out of ideas and the West is closing ranks behind Ukraine. Ukraine may never become a NATO member, but it doesn't need to. It's in the tightest Western embrace ever. According to reports, Russia's imports from technologically advanced countries are dropping exponentially. What it means is that Russia's ability to manufacture complex weapons and systems is being impacted, and this impacts China too, right? The war and its uncertain outcomes are not something India planned on either. It's not just that India's traditional dependence on Russia that now lies in tatters. It is not enough for Indian leaders to say this is not India's war. It is rapidly becoming India's war. Second, India needs to keep the crosshairs trained on the primary challenge, and guess what that is? China. Some of this came through during the India-Europe conversations, but essentially India has to carve out a partnership with Europe that is clean, green, digital and non-China. Third, and most important, India has to once again think big with the US on Indo-Pacific and global security. Think big. Canvas is wide, right? Go start from the Solomon Islands, Argentina, Latin America, Western Africa, and the Caribbean. There is growing space for India if India wants to jump in. Kurt Campbell, the US's Indo-Pacific czar, said over the weekend, one of the things that is clearly underway between the United States and Europe is a desire to engage more fundamentally India. Campbell said, in the new strategic context, India in many respects is a swing state, and it is in all our best interest to try and work overtime to bend its trajectory more to the west. Like I've always said, US and Asia after Ukraine, as written by C. Rajamohan, is something else that you must read. US emphasis on the long-term challenge from China has meant that Washington is willing to cut some political slack for India on the Russian question. He says US President Biden summit meeting with the leaders of ASEAN this week in Washington, his travel to Seoul and Tokyo later in the month, and participation in the Quad Forum in the Japanese capital answers many important questions about the US global strategy. But America's assessment of the Russian and Chinese threats has not changed since the war began in Ukraine. As the director of the US Central Intelligence Agency, Bill Burns, told the FT the other day, China was the biggest geopolitical challenge we faced over the long term as a country, even though the threat from Putin's Russia could not be underestimated. So, plays with India, right? Contrary to the initial assumption that America is on the retreat and West is in disarray, it is Moscow and Beijing that are on the defensive as the war in Ukraine completes 3 months. The idea that China will gain from the Russian war in Ukraine has also proven to be false. If Putin is locked in a military conflict that can be neither win nor withdraw from, Xi has tied himself to the fading star Putin. Expectations that Russia's triumph in Ukraine will be followed by a successful Chinese invasion of Taiwan have begun to dissipate. If the annexation of Taiwan must wait, Xi Jinping must also cope with the continuing pressure from the US on a range of issues, economic, political, and diplomatic. This week's summit-level engagement with ASEAN comes after sustained high-level US outreach to the region since the Biden administration took charge. While it was widely assumed that Southeast Asia was lost to Chinese dominance, Biden has said, not so fast. The two parts of Biden's answer to the Europe-Asia or Russia-China question have worked well for India. For one, the US emphasis on the long-term challenge from China has meant that Washington is willing to cut some political slack for Delhi on the Russian question. This gives India time to diversify its defense ties that have been heavily dependent on Russia. The US emphasis on partnership rather than unilateralism in dealing with the China challenge means India's agency in the region can only grow. The Quad allows Delhi to carve out a larger role for itself in Asia and Indo-Pacific in collaboration with the US and its allies. In collaboration with the US and its allies, not with Russia, folks. All the bump jump guys. Wary of Biden's Asia visit, Beijing launches drills in Southeast Asia. Biden arrives in South Korea on first Asia trip as president. Modi-Biden will meet in Japan on Quad summit sidelines next week. Quad meet to review initiatives, forge visions for future collaboration. Way to go. Cheers. So we have a situation where, obviously, like I said, what the China thought as just a form in the sea is turning into some kind of a wave, which now they're getting extremely concerned about. But hey, what is it Ukraine has done for us? The Ukraine and the Russians, as I read out a note from Indrani Bagchi, they've kind of made us into a pivotal state. The question is, are we in a position to kind of grab the opportunity by hand, because we've missed others in the past? And as Mitali Chatterjee Miller writes, Ukraine war will impact Asian politics. It sure will. More than 600 MNCs have divested from Russia, resulting in deglobalization, proving that it is apparently possible to economically decouple as the West has done from Russia. This is a lesson from India too, right? Not everybody, you can't be this thing has a sell-by date, not going to be there forever, right? This means it could, in the long term, as the New York Times recently put it, fracture the world into economic blocks. You want to be on the right side. Finally, there are diplomatic ramifications of the Ukraine war, which have the potential to restructure order in Asia. The current international order is based ultimately on the Westphalian system. The 1648 Peace of Westphalian created the inviolable principle of territorial sovereignty and integrity. That later international orders drew on. Okay, the US, European Union and Asian countries such as Japan, Korea and Singapore worry that if Russia succeeds in violating Ukraine's sovereignty and faces little consequences, it will embolden China vis-a-vis Taiwan as well as other areas in the Pacific that China lays claim to, including parts of India, right? Why US confronting Russia will bolster the Indo-Pacific? This is important, written by Samir Lalwani. As the West punishes Russia for its invasion of Ukraine through sanctions, a depleted Russia will see frictions in its partnership with China. This, coupled with US's increased role in the Indo-Pacific, will work in India's favor, which it already is, right? First, there should be no illusions that Vladimir Putin initiated this war. War was not forced on Russia. This is what a lot of commentators in India continue to talk about, right? A second myth is that China will be the big beneficiary of this war with cheap Russian commodities, the yuan's growing influence as a reserve currency, and deepened defense cooperation, one of the leading military powers, right? The war in Ukraine, however, may generate the very frictions between Russia and China that India has long desired. China analysts says Beijing got played by Russia to look like an accomplice. US intelligence officers believe Xi Jinping has been unsettled by Russia's struggles. China is walking a fine line with abstentions in the United Nations compliance and some financial and technological sanctions and thinly veiled criticism regarding sovereignty, right? He says, more importantly, Russia seems likely to emerge from this conflict a much depleted partner bordering on a liability for China. Russia has fared abysmally and lost a staggering amount of manpower and material in a few short weeks with little to show for it. It has suffered 10,000 regular troops killed, another 30,000 wounded, missing or taken prisoners, 10% of its equipment lost, and over 1450 missiles expended. Russia's ability to reload will be severely constrained by a depleted economy, financial sanctions, technology denial regimes, depressed demographics, and brain drain. Russian military power, including training, morale, and equipment, has been exposed to be hollow. China will also be sobered by the consequences of invasion and disabuse of ease of major military offensive. The Ukrainians have provided a resistance blueprint for any target of China's, including India, China's aggression, including India, on how to defeat an offensive through the stockpiling of small, cheap, and asymmetric capabilities like air defense and anti-tank missiles, drones, and mines. Taiwan is already taking notice and adopt lessons. India must too, right? Fears that effort to back Ukraine against Russian aggression will entangle US strategy in Europe and distract it from its priority theater of the Indo-Pacific are unfounded. Even in the throes of the crisis, the US remained focused on Asia with a steady stream of senior officials, visits to the region, a Quad leaders meeting, a renewed Indo-Pacific strategy, a national defense strategy that prioritizes China, and significant progress on AUKUS to bolster Australia's advanced defense capabilities. Moreover, Ukrainian defenses have applications for the Indo-Pacific. They set precedents for the kind of retaliation and interdiction the US, its allies, and its partners can marshal against any aggressor who tries to change borders by military force. But these challenges should not obscure realities and opportunities. Transnational partnerships are re-energizing, Europe hardening, Russia is staggering, China's military optimism is likely moderating, and if US continues enhancing deterrence in the Indo-Pacific around reliable partners, most of these work in India's interest, right? And that you know why they're in trouble. Indo-Pacific strategy bound to fail, says China. China blasts US Japan ahead of Quad summit. Foreign Secretary hints may join US Indo-Pacific plan. Dig at China, India highlights plight of debt-ridden nations, right? And this, folks, is the important part. 3 cheers. So China and Russia both got the Quad wrong, right? But here are the challenges, Quad opportunities and challenges as written by Nirupama Subramanian. Distraction of Europe. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has shaken up the old order, reshaping geopolitics around the world. Those who fear that Biden administration may lose focus on China, the real threat to the US, have been making the case for Europe's strategic autonomy and security self-reliance. But there is also a growing view that this is not an either-or choice for the US, and that what happens in Europe is not insulated from Asia or Indo-Pacific. I got it right. The threat of China, while China does not find mention in any official statement of the Quad by name. The four nations are joined by the shared interest of creating a strategic balance of power in the region to protect their interests in the Indo-Pacific region from what they see as China's subversion of the international order and a bid to establish its own set of rules. Non-security initiatives, cutting-edge technology, pharmaceuticals and infrastructure have been described as key battlegrounds in the contest with China. The last Quad summit threw up an array of proposals intended to leverage the economic, scientific and technological capabilities of the four countries, and sure is gathering a lot of momentum, right? However, while it's gathering momentum, Quad must deepen security cooperation, says Dhruv Jaishankar. When leaders of Quad nations meet in Japan, the focus may be on economics and trade, but security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific will be key to ensuring the balance of power. Not to forget, India should not forget that. Nonetheless, a lot can be done. A first area of focus ought to be on information and intelligence sharing, including but not restricted to the maritime domain. The maritime domain has absolutely happened. A second area might involve operational cooperation. This can be done through cross-servicing, resupply and replenishment at sea, mid-air refueling, ship repair, and a host of legal arrangements to facilitate such services. Ship repair, I believe we've signed that deal. A third area of eventual cooperation might relate to improving defense capacity, including on trade, manufacturing, and technology. But if Quad is to help persevere a stable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, while continuing to provide the region with public goods, security cooperation will have to deepen. This will require acknowledging the concerns of partners, countries treading carefully and slowly building trust and habits of cooperation. And then, NATO blunders, Quad lessons. West failed to read Putin's ambitions and downgraded NATO. This mistake should not be repeated with Quad. Never misread China. This goes for especially for the Australians, everybody, right? The great maritime strength of the Quad is its force of maritime patrol aircraft. Japan and the US are particularly rich in these resources. India's force of P-81s is substantial, and with the help of Australia, a maritime domain awareness can be built up that denies the PLA Navy the chance to hide in the vastness of oceans. The Indo-US Communication Agreement was presumably established to keep the four nations search group on a common grid. It would be useful to establish an Indo-Pacific situation plot at Visakhapatnam, backed by an elite naval staff to watch the transformation of China from a regional power into a world-class navy. Quad meetings should be headed by naval officers with diplomatic support so that they don't produce irrelevant communiques like the one in February 22 that spoke of dealing with COVID, climate change and natural disasters. Absolutely right. Quad plans to set up maritime pressure on China, and this is exactly what we had to say earlier. Expected to launch satellite-based initiative to counter Chinese illegal fishing. Modi to meet Indian diaspora. But this is critical. Fishing. They are going after protein, and I've told you that. MDL's extended underwater technology clause to oust most global bidders. And this I'm just reading the headlines to say how we cut our own feet. What we need is Delhi's sea blindness needs to be improved by Arun Prakash. Nations which were lagging behind India a few decades ago have surged ahead because of their vision and dynamism in the vital maritime arena. Today, India's major ports are overloaded and inefficient. Our shipbuilding industry is moribund, the merchant fleet is inadequate and growing at a snail's pace. Seabed exploitation has yet to take off, the fishing industry is backward, and human resources are lacking everywhere. Important to note, folks, naval power will play a decisive role in India's China rivalry. India needs national strategy for maritime sector, and that is absolutely. So these are the headlines coming out of Japan, and all our music to India's ears. India joins US move to set up Indo-Pacific Economic Bloc. India, Japan are natural partners. Modi to diaspora. Modi to attend Quad meet, hold bilateral talks. Biden says US ready to shield Taiwan military from China. That was the most important takeaway. India, 11 others joined US initiative, but countries close to China stay away. Indonesia, largest ASEAN nation in it. India among first 13 to join US's Indo-Pacific Eco Bloc plan. New framework seeks to counter China's influence. Make in India for the world. PM Japan, Japanese CEOs. India joins IPAF. Indo-Pacific is growth engine, says Modi. It really is. India a strong, resilient and responsible democracy, says Modi. Singing and selling democracy. India joins Indo-Pacific Economic Bloc led by US to counter China. Biden warns if China invades Taiwan, US will defend it militarily. Will strengthen supply chain pillars, trust, transparency and timeliness, says PM. Quad to talk hurdles facing Indo-Pacific. Focus on making it inclusive. Foreign Secretary. US South Korea open to expand military drills to deter North. Again, Korea was a big takeaway. Quad, 50 billion 5-year infra booster for Indo-Pacific. Do remember, 50 billion means once you put this as an equity, sky is the limit in terms of size of the project. Quad pledges 50 billion package with tangible benefits to check China. India stand on Ukraine ensures there's no mention of Russia in joint statement. Partnership of trust. Biden, Modi push tech defense ties. Quad warns against moves to alter status quo in Indo-Pacific. US President praises India's COVID fight, contrasts this with China. Modi, Biden launch initiative on new tech to expand defense ties. In message to China, Quad opposes militarization of disputed features. Quad signs off on Indo-Pacific, split on Russia, unity on China. But this is about Biden to Modi. Thank you for your commitment to make democracy deliver. He's pointing it out again. Russia, China conduct war drills near Japan even as Quad meets. So they are in trouble. Tokyo terms joint air patrol a provocation, scrambles jets. Washington says it reveals depth of cooperation. Biden, US-India ties to be among the closest on earth. Really, our relationship is a partnership of trust. Modi's success has shown World democracies can deliver, says Biden. Focus again on democracies. At meet with PM, Kishida agrees to boost defense manufacturing. Lots of takeaways in the squad meet. Jai Hind.